This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. Please mute yourselves if you are not speaking in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you very much.
Recording in progress.
योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि स्तुवे पतञ्जलिं व्यासं शङ्करं च मुनित्रयं कर्तृसूत्रस्य भाष्यस्य क्रमाद्विवरणस्य च. So we were discussing the 16th sutra. I think I mentioned a very important point to keep in mind. The sutras beginning with 17th and ending with 23rd of this 4th chapter Kaivalyapada try to establish the fact that there is one ultimate reality which is self-effulgent, which is the seer, the perceiver of everything. And it's called Purusha in the Yoga Sankhya tradition. And the context is very interesting. There seems to be a difference of opinion between Patanjali, the teacher of yoga philosophy, and also Sankhya philosophy by implication, because yoga philosophy derived its metaphysics from Sankhya system. So this point of difference between the Sankhya view or yoga view and one school of Buddhism, it is called Yogachara or Kshanika Vijnanavada view. It will be of peculiar interest to students of philosophy. I wanted to emphasize again and again that it is not a refutation of Buddha's view. Yoga and Sankhya philosophers have absolutely no difference with the original views of Buddha. The Yogachara system is a system of philosophy that emerged almost 350 or 400 years after Buddha's passing away. So, in fact, this discussion continues, and this is an important area in the entire Yogachara text. Patanjali's system is relatively simple, but in this particular context, Patanjali wanted to emphasize one important point, that mind is not the self. Mind is not the ultimate seer. Mind is not the ultimate all-knowing subject. Mind is only an object. And the subject of mind or the seer of the mind is something that is behind the mind, that is beyond the mind, and that according to yoga view is called Purusha. So I wanted to create the right background for this. As I mentioned earlier, the yoga metaphysics is a derivation from Sankhya view. Sankhya philosophy was expounded by Kapila, but Kapila's original sutras are not available today. Maybe some portions of Kapila's ancient text may be available, but today we mostly depend upon one important book which was written much later, and that's called Sankhya Karika. So today, if you go to any library, and if you want to study an original text of the Sankhya philosophy, the most prominent book you have to study is Sankhya Karika, and it was written by a philosopher with the name Ishvara Krishna. And in that book, he talks about 24 principles which are related to Prakriti or Pradhana, which is the source of evolution of the entire universe. It's interesting. In fact, when you read in the important books written by Western authors or modern English authors from India, not Radhakrishnan, but late after Radhakrishnan, when you read the book Hindu View of Evolution, it is actually a reference to Sankhya system of philosophy. And Swami Vivekananda was the first great thinker in modern times who introduced this to Western world. And in that book, there is an important verse. Those of you who would like to read the book, is third verse of the Sankhya Karika. Moola Prakriti Ravikriti Mahadadhyaha Prakriti Vigridaya Sapta Shodashagastu Vikaro Na Prakriti Na Vikriti Purusha. This is a verse. What it means is, one reality, Purusha, is not the source of evolution, and it is not an evolute. Prakriti and Purusha are two fundamental categories in Sankhya system, of which Purusha is totally unconcerned, totally non-involved or uninvolved in the evolution. Everything in this world, in fact, all the trees and mountains and valleys, which are Pancha Mahabhutas, 5 elements, our body, our mind, our intellect, our senses of perception and senses of action, all these are evolutes. That's why you often find, when you read in the works of Dr. Radhakrishnan, Hirian and other modern Indian interpretation of Indian philosophy, you find they say mind is only matter according to Vedanta or according to Indian philosophy. Mind is only an evolute of Prakriti, which means it is not all-knowing, it is only an evolute, the result of evolution. So, first of all, there is Pradhana Prakriti, that is the source of evolution. From Pradhana, Mahatattva, cosmic intelligence. Cosmic intelligence. It is the totality, not only numerical totality, but also the essential totality of individual intelligence. So, I'll try to explain this. Numerical totality means the sum total of all individual modifications, individual manifestations of human intelligence. Also, the essence, the real intelligent principle behind all human intellectual faculties. That is called Mahatattva. That is the first evolute from Prakriti. And from Mahatattvam, Ahankara, the cosmic ego, the I-ness, the awareness. Not Atman, but the feeling I, that awareness, the ego. And that awareness, Ahankara, has got 3 dimensions: Sattvika, Rajasika and Tamasika. From Sattvika Ahankara, mind and 5 senses of perception and 5 senses of action evolve. From Tamasika Ahankara, the 5 subtle elements and the 5 gross elements. 5 subtle elements and 5 gross elements. These may need some introduction to those who are not specialists in this Indian philosophical system, either Buddha, Jaina or Indian philosophical systems. The subtle elements, for example, according to them, according to this philosophy, it's a common principle accepted in all Indian philosophical systems. Behind the visible manifestations of the five elements, there is an invisible subtle manifestation. It's called Tanmatra. And the five elements that we see around are evolutes of the Tanmatras. Those of you who are interested, you can, to get an idea of this, you can read important books written by Dr. Radhakrishnan, Professor Hiriyanna, S.N. Das Gupta. I am mentioning only those great academic philosophers. They are all great academics who have written in English language. Dr. Radhakrishnan's Indian Philosophy Volume 1 and Volume 2 are well known, the most commonly referred books, and Hiriyanna's 5-volume series, 6 volumes right now, History of Indian Philosophy. And Professor Hiriyanna was perhaps the greatest Sanskrit scholar among these three. He has written very, very authentic works on different systems of Indian philosophy, but they are more of a academic and highly involved sentences about Dr. Hiriyanna's works. There is a criticism which is not fully justified, but there is a bit of humor in it, so I am quoting that. They say, those who have studied original Sanskrit books, they don't read, they don't require, they don't need Hiriyanna's books, because they don't require that. And those who have not read the original books, they won't be benefited by reading his English translations, because it is not as readable or it's not as accessible as Dr. Radhakrishnan's 2 volumes, which is perhaps the most popular introductions, academic introductions of Indian philosophy. So now so behind the Tanmatra there are Panchamahabhutas. So these constitute altogether 24 principles which constitute the entire created universe. This is the Hindu way of evolution. From Prakriti or Pradhana, first cosmic intelligence is called Mahat Tattvam. Then from there Ahankara, and Ahankara has got 3 dimensions. From Sattvika Ahankara, the 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, and mind. So mind is one of the evolutes. It's an important thing to remember. So very often when you listen to modern agnostics and atheists who would say where Atman is only an evolute, is a matter, it is something material, it is a product of human intelligence, it's a product of brain. Very often, the traditional philosopher will laugh at them because they think that Atman is beyond matter. So when Dr. Dawkins and others will tell you, well, your consciousness or your Atman or whatever God or whatever it is, it's only it's a product of human intelligence or brain. It is so laughable from the standpoint of traditional Hindu philosophers. So you should excuse them for laughing at him. That's all. So remember 24 fundamental principles, that is Pradhana, Mahatattva, then 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, mind, then 5 Panchatanmatras, 5 Tanmatras, and Panchamahabhutas. These are 24 principles. Now, these constitute what we see and experience with our 5 senses of perception, with the eyes, ears, mind, all in together. Whatever we see, whatever we objectify, all kinds of objectified knowledge belongs to this category. It's all matter. Okay, this is one. All fall under the category of Pradhana or Prakriti. The other reality is Purusha. And Patanjali, of course, Vyasa in his commentary, not Patanjali. Patanjali implies, Vyasa expands the idea and writes a commentary on it. Vyasa in his commentary says, well, he's addressing the Buddhist philosophers, Yogacara system. I also should tell you something about Yogacara system. Yogacara system is one of the 2 schools of idealistic philosophies, which emerged almost 350 or 400 years after Buddha's passing away. Buddha didn't worry about these things. Buddha was only concerned about life in this world, the problem of dukkha and the solution to the dukkha, nirvana, which he preached in Prakrit language, written in Pali script, which is known as Pali canonical literature, Tripitakas, Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka and Abhidhamma Pitaka. Okay, now the two schools of idealism, one was called Yogacara system, the other was called Shunyavada. These are idealistic schools, and the two schools of realism, Sautrantikas and Vaibhashikas. In this particular context, Vyasa is trying to tell the Buddhists, the so-called Yogacara philosophers, you may call them subjective idealists. Sometimes they are called Vainashikas because they deny everything. And that's one of the, so you find here Patanjali Vyasa uses that term, which was a term prevalent during his time. Okay, now you have seen this sutra, 17th sutra, Sada Jnataha Chitta Virteha Ta Prabhoga Purushasya Abhirinamitvad. We already discussed this. What this sutra tells you is that the fact that mind is always known by something or somebody other than the mind, that knower, the seer of mind, should be beyond mind. Should be something that transcends mind. And what is that reality which transcends mind? It is Purusha. That is, and that Purusha is aparinami, means that Purusha is not subject to any changes. Mind is changing all the time, but there is something, somebody who sees the mind, who perceives the mind, who experiences the mind, and that entity is Purusha, and that Purusha is beyond all changes. Parinama means change. Aparinami means something that doesn't change. Aparinamitva means because it is unchanging. That's the meaning here. We already discussed this earlier. Okay, now the next sutra, that's what we are going to discuss today. That is the 19th sutra, I think, yeah, 19th one. We already discussed that one. 18th sutra is the previous Abhirinamitva. Then 19th sutra is Natat Swabhasam Drishyatvat. The 19th sutra. Natat Swabhasam. It means, that means that chittam, that mind. Vyasa or Patanjali is referring to the Yogacara view that chittam or mind is the only entity, it is the ultimate reality. So if Yogacara people, if the Buddhists tell you the mind is Atman, mind is self, what they mean is mind is the ultimate reality. So very often the self is a metaphor for the transcendental reality. So if the Yogacara philosophers tell you that so far as they are concerned, mind is Atman, what it means is there is nothing beyond mind. Because for them Vijnana, they are using the word Vijnanam. Vijnanam in Yogacara system means Chittam, and Chittam means mind. So when you see something in your mind, it exists. When you don't see, it doesn't exist. So the ontological reality, the ontological existence of everything depends upon your awareness of its existence. When you are seeing a chair in front of you, when you are aware of the existence of the chair in front of you, then the chair exists so far as you are concerned. When that awareness disappears, the chair is as good as non-existent so far as you are concerned. This is the view of the Yogacara philosophers. There is some resemblance to this Western school of this subjective idealism, Berkeley subjective idealism. Of course, there are major points of differences which beyond scope right now, we may discuss later. So, Vyasa tells that, Patanjali says that natat swabhasam drishyatva. That mind is not, it is not self-effulgent, because it is not self-illuminating, because the mind is experienced by somebody. For example, I am happy, I am unhappy, I am hungry, I am thirsty. My mind is experiencing this. But who is the I? Or my mind is tired now. My mind is not happy now. So when you use the word sixth case, my mind, who is the I there? Somebody else other than the mind. And who is the I? According to Yogacara philosophers, there is no reply. According to Patanjali, that I is Purusha. Because Purusha is always the unchanging seer. So, this is a debate between the subjective idealists, Yogacara, and of course this yoga, the yoga philosophers. Yogacara and yoga philosophy, totally different things. Yogacara is a system of Buddhist philosophy. It's called, also another name is the Vijnanavada. So Yogacara or Vijnanavada. That is different from yoga philosophy. So they were called Yogacara philosophers like Vasubandhu, Asanga, Dignaga. They were great names among the Indian logicians and metaphysicists. They were called Yogacharas according to some scholars. They were great practitioners of meditation and Ashtanga Yoga. So, and if you go to certain places in India, especially the state of Bihar and Madhya Pradesh, Ajanta, Ellora, you find many caves and many images of great Buddhist saints and sages seated meditative posture. So it is believed that they were also great practitioners of yoga, and some of the commentators of yoga system, yoga philosophy, were also Buddhists. So it's a different matter. So somebody may ask this question: what's the use of all this discussion? Two reasons. One is a very interesting academic exercise. Second reason is it helps you to make better use of our energy and time. That's an important thing. Because when you understand yoga, what happens is we get a better picture of our own inner resources, our own mental faculties. See, for example, if you can think of something beyond the mind, then you can imagine, well, I'm tired, but the real I is somebody other than my mind. And that I is only witness of this mind which is getting tired. So that I am not tired. So you can always visualize somebody behind mind. In fact, if you can go beyond mind, if you can think of something or somebody that goes beyond mind, it is actually a great relief. In fact, in mindfulness meditation, we are actually going beyond mind. But the mindfulness philosophers won't admit that it is a search for Atman. That's the only thing. And another thing I want to mention is, when you read Swami Vivekananda's complete works, you should remember Swamiji is trying to link and connect yoga system of philosophy with Vedanta. Because Swamiji knew, as a great philosopher and a spiritual teacher, he knew that yoga system of philosophy finds its fulfillment only in Vedanta. So here there is an interesting statement from Vyasa in his commentary. Bhashyam. Syat asanga chittameva swabhasam vishyabhasam cha vainashikanam chittatmavadinam bhavishyati idi agnivat. Is a statement that comes from Vyasa. The idea is this. Here is a doubt may arise. He's introducing this debate between two schools of philosophers. The Vijnanavadins, who tell you that there is nothing beyond chittam, beyond mind. So Vijnanavadins use this term chittam, mana and Vijnanam to mean mind. Mind is what they actually are talking about. So in this context, Vyasa says, listeners may feel this doubt, they may feel this doubt. Ashanka means doubt. Chittameva swabhasam. This mind itself is self-illuminating and also the illuminator of other objects. Vainashiganam Chidatmavadinam. So the subjective idealists or Vijnanavadins are called Chidatmavadi, means Chidatmavadinaha. Those who argue that Chittam itself is Atman, or Chittam itself is the absolute reality. And there is an example given, Agnivad, like fire. So the reason is Swabhasam Vishayabhasam. Swabhasam means this Chittam, mind, knows itself and also it knows other objects. And example is given fire or light. Now what are the characteristics of light? Light illumines other objects and light illumines itself. Suppose you kindle a lamp or a lamp in front of you. You can see the lamp in front of you. And because of the light that spreads around, you can also see other objects. So fire or light, what we call normally light, is revealing itself. And also it reveals other objects. Therefore, the Buddhist philosophers argue there is nothing other than mind. Mind is everything. So your search for Atman is absolutely ridiculous. Mind is the only thing we have got, nothing beyond mind. In fact, they come dangerously close to some of the views of modern materialists. They say everything is a sensation of the brain, mind, thoughts, nothing beyond. So anyway, now here Vyasa begins his commentary. He says, he's trying to answer this problem. He's trying to refute this view. Yatha idarani indriyani sabdadayascha drishyatvad na swabhasani tatha mano api pratyedavyam. So yatha idarani indriyani sabdadayascha drishyatvad. Now our senses like eyes, ears, the sense of touch, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, and also the objects. What are objects? Shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. For example, shabda we hear, and rupa we see, sparsha we touch, rasa we through taste we know, and gandha through smell we understand. These are all different objects. And ears, eyes, all these are different senses by which we come to know all different things, different objects by seeing, visual, by audio, by hearing, or by smelling, or by tasting, whatever it is. And all these are drishyas, all these are experienced or seen by somebody else. Why? Because mind is experienced and seen by somebody else. Because when we feel we are hungry, we are thirsty, somebody else is realizing that, well, my mind is now angry, my mind is now disturbed, my mind is now agitated. So when you use the my mind, who is the I there? Somebody other than the mind. So according to that somebody, which is other than the mind itself is only an object. Drishya means something that is perceived or seen. So who is the seer? Somebody other than the mind. So, na swabhasani tatha mano api pratyedavyam. Therefore, mind also is actually an object that is illumined by somebody else. That's Agniratra Drishtantaha. Therefore, Vyasa says in his commentary, your example or your idea of showing fire as an example to show the self-illuminating characteristics of the mind and also its faculty to illumine other objects. It is not correct, because mind itself is illumined by somebody else, is seen by somebody else, experienced by somebody else. When I say my mind is disturbed, here somebody other than the mind is experiencing the disturbance of the mind. Therefore, mind itself is an object of experience. Therefore, the example of Agni, showing fire as an example, is not correct. The reason why this is not correct, actually it is to be understood, according to commentators, it is to be understood in the light of an interesting passage in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a striking paragraph which is actually one of the most celebrated portions of the most celebrated Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka. It is called Jyoti Brahmanam. Means a particular section of the Brihadaranyaka text that deals with light. That's a literal meaning. Light here in the Brihadaranyaka is an important book in the Vedantic tradition. Light doesn't mean light as we understand it. Light means something that reveals everything, something in whose presence everything is revealed. So Jyoti is the word used here. Jyoti doesn't mean just a light that we see. Jyoti is a metaphor for something that is self-illuminating and something that is also which is something that illumines, which can illumine everything in this world. It's called Jyoti Brahmanam. It's in the form of a dialogue between a great sage called Yajnavalkya and a great philosopher known as Janaka. So one day the great sage Janaka visits Janaka is the name of a king and a philosopher. Yajnavalkya is the great sage. One day, this great sage Yajnavalkya is a great saint and philosopher. Yajnavalkya visits Janaka. He is a philosopher king who was Yajnavalkya's friend. So Yajnavalkya, the great sage, visits Janaka in his court. At that time, Janaka the king put some question to Yajnavalkya. The question is, Yajnavalkya, Kim Jyotirayam Purushaidi? This simple question. What is the light that helps us in this world? Of course, Kim Jyotirayam Purushaidi, Aditya Jyoti Samradidi Yokovaja, Aditya Neva Ayam Jyotishaste Pallayade Karma Gurude Vipalyade Didi Ivamaveda Yajnavalkya. This is how it begins. It's in ascending order. It is a gradual evolution from the most physical light to spiritual light. A gradual evolution of human quest or human inquiry from physical light to spiritual illumination. So the question is, the King Janaka, philosopher King Janaka, puts to Yajnavalkya, the sage, Kim Jyotirayam Purushaidi. What is that light which helps a person to live in this world? With the help of what light does a person sit, goes about, walks about, returns to his place and performs his duties and responsibilities? A simple elementary question. So Yajnavalkya replies, Aditya Jyoti means the light of sun. The first. Second stage. Then the king Janaka asked another question. Astamide Aditya Yajnavalkya Kim Jyotirevayam Purushayini. Suppose the sun has set in the west in the evening, there is no more sunlight available. What is the light that helps you to move about, to live in this world, to do things? Moonlight, Chandra Jyoti, moonlight. Suppose the sun has gone, there is no moonlight, then what light helps you? What is that light which helps you to do things? What is that light which reveals things? So, light should be understood to mean the illuminator, the ultimate revealer. Something in whose presence everything gets revealed. You become aware. The spiritual principle behind awareness. What is that light? But there is no sunlight, no moonlight. Well, Yajnavalkya replied, Agni Jyoti. I mean, when you don't have sunlight and moonlight, you may strike a matchstick. You may start a fire in your fireplace. That's what you do. Suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire. Then what do you do? What's the light? Then Vagjyoti. So suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no candle. How do you know that there is a cat moving in the room where you are sitting in pitch darkness? You hear the sound. So then sound becomes the light, the revealer. The fifth question is, suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire, and then let's say you can't hear anything, then what is the light? There is Atma Jyoti. Suppose you can't see anything, there is no light at all, you can't hear anything, you may be sitting there, you may think, in your mind, you may recollect what you experienced the previous day. Memory comes back to the mind, you think, you contemplate, and through this contemplation, ideas are revealed to you. So there is no sunlight. There is no physical light, sunlight or moonlight or light of fire or light of sound, nothing. So what is the light which helps you in such a situation? Atma Jyoti. And that Atma Jyoti is the one unfailing source of light. If the Atma Jyoti is not there, the light of the Atman, the light of the self, the light of Atman is not there, then sunlight will not help you. A dead man cannot see, even in sunlight, or moonlight, or fire. Because the Atman withdraws itself from the physical body-mind complex. Then the ability of the sun to reveal things, or the ability of the moon or the sun or fire to reveal things, gone. There is somebody else who is sitting within you, which other than the physical body. In Shankaracharya's commentary, his Dehatma Vidirektatva means a light that is distinct and different from your body-mind complex. That is already there in you. It is that light which actually helps you to make use of sunlight or moonlight or whatever it is. So that Atma Jyoti is the only real light. Light of all lights. Jyotisham Jyoti. That's a word used in the Brihadaranyaka text. So in the Vedantic text you find Tameva Bhandam Anubhadi Sarvam Tasya Bhasa Sarvam Idam Vibhadi. That light, which is the light of Atman, because of the light of the Atman, all other lights are functioning as lights. As I mentioned, Jyoti or light should be understood as something that reveals itself and also reveals other objects. That's what we call light. A light, suppose there is uh, there's a burning candle in front of you. You know it where it is there. And because of its presence, other objects around are also revealed. So light is something that self-reveals. It also reveals everything else. So the point is, according to Sankhya Yoga philosophers, this Atman is the essence of self-effulgence, self-illumination. So Vivekananda in 19th century, I think Swami Vivekananda is the first great modern thinker who links yoga philosophy to Vedanta. As I mentioned earlier, yoga philosophy as a metaphysical system is incomplete. But it is very relevant, very important. So Yoga Sankhya system is very important in understanding some of the fundamental details of Vedanta. But its conclusion is not always acceptable because it is a kind of eternal dualism. In Shankaracharya's commentaries, when he talks about dualism or Dvaita, he is not talking about Madhva's Dvaita Siddhanta or anything, because Madhva was born 400 years after Shankaracharya passed away. Dvaita philosophy in Vedantic tradition was expounded by Madhvacharya, who was born 350, nearly 400 years after Shankaracharya's times. So when Shankaracharya in his commentaries talk about Dvaita system, pluralism in metaphysical system is talking about Sankhya system. So actually, this is what actually Vyasa has in mind when he is going to expound this self-illuminating nature of Purusha. So you find Nahi Agnihi Atmaswarupam Prakasham Prakashedi. Fire is not revealing its form which is not already revealed. See, remember, even to understand there is fire, you need something else. You need your eyes and your mind. When mind and eyes come together, or mind and sense of touch come together, then only you can see the fire or you can feel the fire because of its heat. For that you use your sense of touch. Which means Agni or fire by itself is not like Purusha. So the point is, Vyasa is trying to say no to the Vijnanavadin's view that mind is like fire which reveals itself and in whose presence things are revealed. But it is not correct. Physical fire cannot reveal itself without somebody seeing it or somebody experiencing its heat and light. But Atman, or Purusha in this context, is self-revealed and it reveals other objects. So remember, this is an important point. In fact, this is the only context in the entire yoga text where Patanjali and incidentally Vyasa the commentator indulged in metaphysical debates, a bit dialectics, or maybe you may call it sophistry, so to speak. Prakashischayam prakashya prakasha samyoge drishtaha. So the point is, so actually prakashya pragashaka samyoga, this is a term in the Vyasa's commentary. What it means, prakashya means something that is seen, revealed, and prakashaka means something that is revealer. When they come together, when your mind, eyes together, when they come in contact with something visual, you come to know of its existence. But Atman is not like that. This awareness, this self-awareness. You don't require anybody else to become aware of what you're aware of. Self-awareness is not a result of this contact between the revealer and what is revealed. See, If there is a clock in front of me, the clock is revealed, prakashya. And my eyes and mind together are the revealers. I understand, become aware of the clock in front of me. But Atman doesn't require any external gadgets to be aware of itself. Behind our senses, mind and intellect, there is one self-revealer in whose presence everything is revealed, and that is Atman. It is called Atma Jyoti in Vedanta. So it is called the Aham Bodha. Nacha Surupa Matre Asti Samyogaha. So to become aware of our own awareness, our own entity, we don't require somebody else. In fact, this is true even in empirical experiences. When you feel hungry, you are the one who feels hungry. And you don't require somebody else to tell you that you are hungry. It is your own self-awareness. This itself is a remote indicator of the fundamental self-revealing characteristic of Atman. When we are happy or unhappy, somebody else need not inform us that we are happy or unhappy. It is an experience, kind of aham bodha. Beyond all this, when we realize that we are the Atman, that transcends body, mind, intellect and everything else, that experience does not require somebody else to inform us, to reveal us. It is our own self-awareness. And according to yoga system, this is Purusha. Again, this Purusha concept finds its fulfillment when you link it, when you understand it in the light of Atman. Nacha Swarupa Matre Asti Samyogaha means when we become aware of our own Swarupa, our own true nature, there is no connection between the revealer and the revealed. See, when a chair is revealed in broad light, your eyes and mind together see the visual object, and that chair and its presence is revealed to you. But our own Atman doesn't require some external entity, external object to reveal it. It is self-evident, swayam prakashaka, aswabhasa, self-effulgent, self-illuminating. That is the nature of Purusha. So remember, as I mentioned earlier, from 17th Sutra to 23rd Sutra, slowly Patanjali is building up his theory that there is one Atman. Of course, in the Patanjali system called Purusha, which is unchanging, aparinami, which is the eternal, non-involved witness, subject or experiencer, and everything else in this world is subject to changes. So there is an interesting idea about this. Patanjali's system of evolution takes into consideration not only our biological system, physical system, but also the evolution of emotions and feelings, everything else. So all these 24 principles included in the evolutionary scale of Patanjali is much more comprehensive. It's an interesting thing about it, we will discuss later. Kincha swabhasam chittamidi agrahimeva kasajid iti sabdartha. So this discussion continues. What it means is, suppose somebody argues that the mind itself is self-illuminating, then it means that that mind cannot be known by somebody else. What is essentially self-evident It cannot be revealed by somebody else. Atman cannot be revealed by something or somebody else, because Atman is self-evident, self-effulgent, self-illuminated. If you say, if somebody argues, our mind itself is self-effulgent, then you have to admit the fact, this is actually wrong, you have to admit the fact that your hunger, your thirst, all these cannot be really understood by you, because the mind itself is the ultimate self-illuminating factor. But mind is not. There is somebody, something else beyond the mind, that is Purusha, that is the ultimate self-revealer. This is Patanjali's view. Now we can have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions. Yeah.
Pranam Swamiji.
Yeah.
Can you comment on the mind's ability to introspect itself, particularly when we make spiritual progress, right? There is two personalities that coexist. There is a spiritual personality that emerges. Is that like, one view is of course the self watching the mind, but there is also like this one personality watching over the other. Can you comment a little bit on that, like the mind introspecting itself?
Yeah. Actually, when we engage in spiritual disciplines, we actually quest in search of our own true identity. As we mentioned, in spiritual life, the first thing that you experience, there is a secondary personality emerges. And so, what is the secondary personality? I am not talking about the secondary personality referred to by Jung in his Modern Man in Search of Soul. That's this something more closely, intimately related to one's individual spiritual practice. So, when you start any kind of spiritual discipline, meditation or anything, first you feel your mind is not willing to cooperate, and that mind which is not willing to cooperate is actually, it's a bundle of the old samskaras which find it difficult to adjust with the new spiritual disciplines that you are trying to undergo, trying to practice. But gradually you find that conflict slowly goes down, slowly it decreases, and you are able to practice meditation without much conflict. I mean, the conflict level goes down. You find your mind is cooperating much better right now. So that shows that the secondary personality, the personality which is willing to accept meditation as an important thing and willing to cooperate with you when you try to meditate, that personality becomes stronger and stronger, and proportionately the previous one which did not cooperate with you when you first tried to meditate, that personality becomes weaker and weaker. That's because the new personality is moving closer and closer to your real self, Atman. The close proximity with Atman, with the spiritual ideal, it reduces the conflict. At the beginning, mind agitates. I feel like going away from the meditation room. Even when you try to read a good book, whether it is Sermon on the Mount or Bhagavad Gita, or any holy text of any tradition, which you feel a bit of boredom. Mind suddenly revolts, and you throw away the book and you start reading some comics to get some relief. Really speaking, people start switching their TV because your mind is not willing to cooperate when you try to read something less exciting. But much more important and spiritually helpful. So mind suddenly agitates and you go and switch on the TV and you see something not entirely helpful, not altogether very helpful to spiritual life. And then you feel relief. The previous mind, the previous personality is dragging you away from your meditation room. And it is happy when you switch on the TV. But if you persist in this spiritual discipline, slowly that conflict keeps decreasing. And slowly the secondary personality, the new spiritual personality, the personality that you want to be with that you want to become identified with, that personality takes control, and then you feel less conflict. So in the Gita, sthita prajna, it means prajna sthita yasya saka, somebody whose mind is well settled, stable when he practices, engage in spiritual disciplines. Because all conflicts gone. Slowly it happens. That's because your mind is moving the right direction, the direction of Atman, direction of God, the direction of your spiritual ideal. And then mind becomes stable and stable. So this is what happens. Please, David, please.
Thanks. Swami, is that like a transformation of buddhi, or is it like a fifth component of mind? I mean, what is that new personality? Is it more of a transformation of some other part of the personality, or is it a new mind?
Yeah.
A new part of the mind, rather?
The new personality emerges because you are generating new set of samskaras, impressions, and that eventually refines, modifies the buddhi. Buddhi and mind should be more or less understood to be identical to each other in this context. So when we generate new samskaras, new tendencies, new impressions through spiritual disciplines, through spiritual readings, through spiritual associations, what happens, the structure of the mental system undergoes a healthy modification. And as it happens, we feel more and more free from conflicts. I've seen this happening, and I heard also the discussions, people who try to practice pranayama, extreme kinds of pranayama, all of a sudden, what happens, they are trying to artificially create new samskaras. It is very dangerous. New samskaras have to be generated, then only you should try to engage in spiritual disciplines which energizes the mind. So that's why yamas and niyamas are very, very important when we engage in spiritual discipline. It doesn't mean that first let us get established yamas and niyamas. Not at all. When we actually try to practice in spiritual disciplines, meditation, and also reading holy books, healthy books, and also try to associate with spiritual personality. That's also one kind of generating spiritual energy, spiritual samskara tendencies. Then what is happening is our mind is getting ready, and then if you engage in meditation, it's good. Forceful meditation is sometimes dangerous for a beginner. It's very, very dangerous. For if a person feels extreme conflict at beginning, no, I won't get up from this seat before 2 hours. It's very dangerous. After 2 hours, that man may suddenly go and drink, because all of a sudden you are trying to generate, or he may engage in something else. We open a TV, watch the Terminator, because suddenly you want to escape from these extreme self-enforced disciplines. Mind gets tense, agitated. So one should meditate little, read, then spend some time reading good books, then trying to think, try to associate people, and slowly then you can meditate for long hours. That's an important point. Mind is a very strange mechanism actually. So before we actually start long hours of meditation, we should prepare our mind. That's very important. So yamas and niyamas can be developed through these, through a set of practices like reading, engaging in spiritual discussions, reading or associating with people, talking about those subjects, and then meditation. It's very important. It should be taken up in so many different fronts, not just one extreme focus thing. That's why Swami Shivananda, Rishikesh Shivananda, the founder of Divine Life Society, used to give strong warning to his students in the early days. I mean, they should be very careful while practicing pranayama and all that in the early days, because it created problems. So he used to give, and his disciples to give warning during the early days. Of course, they were great spiritual teachers. He was himself a medical practitioner, Swami Shivananda. I'm talking about Swami Shivananda, who was the founder of Divine Life Society. I'm talking about. Very, very balanced, slow, steady approach. Playing with the mind is a risky game. That's an important thing. Okay. Namaskar.
Sutra 16, Swami Vivekananda's translation has two sutras listed in there. Before 17, he has one additional sutra included in this. His translation says, things are known or unknown to the mind, being dependent on the coloring which they give to the mind. That is 16. Right next to it, there is Sanskrit 17. The states of the mind are always known because the Lord of the mind, the Purusha, is unchangeable.
Yeah.
And then he continues with Sutra 17 in a separate track.
Yeah. You know, the Sutra 17 is Sada Jnataha Chitta Vrutteha Tat Prabhova Purushasya Aparinamitvad. So one sutra is Nacha Eka Chitta Tantram Vastu Tada Pramanagam Tada Kim Syad. This is actually a statement from Vyasa's commentary, and that is taken as a separate sutra by some scholars. So this sutra is directly a refutation of the Vijnanavada view that mind is everything. There is nothing beyond mind. So that particular statement is really considered to be just one sentence in Vyasa's commentary. But that is taken out, detached from Vyasa's commentary and presented as a separate sutra. So you take this as a sutra, there will be 196 sutras in the Patanjali system. That is a matter of opinion among scholars, So that sutra actually, it can be, of course, you can say that, what it means is, Chittam, Jnanam, Vijnanam. All these are, first of all, you should know, Chittam, Jnanam and Vijnanam. All these mean the same thing so far as Vijnanavadins are concerned. And according to them, suppose you come to know one object, and if that object disappears and some other object comes, then when the previous object disappears, so far as you are concerned, the previous object doesn't exist, but it may be still seen by another person. So how can you say that the previous object doesn't exist at all? So it's only in your mind you can say it doesn't exist, but so far as others are concerned, it exists. Actually, it is something linked to Kshanika Vijnana. Kshanika means momentariness, Kshanabhangavada of the Vijnanavadins also. So your question is this, Ekachitta Tantram Na. I mean, it is not linked to your mind. I mean, the object the existence of an object doesn't depend upon your mind. Your mind cannot be the ultimate decider, because even when you don't see, others see the same object. So, nacha ekachita tantram vastu tada apramanakam tada kim syat. Ekachita tantram means vastu na ekachita tantram. What it means? Vastu means object. Na ekachita tantra means its existence doesn't depend upon whether it is experienced by one mind or another mind. When you don't see it, somebody else sees that. So it is not authentic, it is not apramanakam. That Vijnanavada view is not authentic. We should remember, people who don't understand the metaphysical background, they will tell you, oh, Patanjali is refuting Buddha. Not at all. Absolutely wrong. If you study philosophy, you should know that. Patanjali has no conflict. Vyasa or Patanjali, they may not have even seen. See, they lived 400 years after Buddha. This Vyasa is not the author of Mahabharata. You should remember that. The Vyasa is a different person. He comes in one of the teachers in the Patanjali school of philosophy. So, one of the arguments in favor of the view that Patanjali came after Buddha is that Patanjali must have lived around 2nd or 3rd century AD, that means 300 years after Buddha. The reason is Patanjali refers to Vijnanavada school of philosophy. So this particular statement coming in Vyasa's commentary should not be taken as a separate sutra. That's only. So Swamiji just taught. Swamiji taught these sutras in San Francisco when he was staying here somewhere in the city. He started giving classes in Raj Yoga. This is how it came out. And Swamiji didn't have a regular book at that time. Perhaps the book that was published at that time that Swamiji used while teaching must have one format that's different from the present versions of Patanjali text. It's a matter of not a very significant thing. The statement is apparently is a refutation of the Vijnanavada school of philosophy, which says that mind or chittam is the only ultimate reality, nothing else. That's
one more question on this, Maharaj.
Yeah.
This sutra indicates minds are multiple and separate. Each there are indirectly it's saying one mind.
True.
See the what stage of evolution in Sankhya system do minds become different? Only the
Okay. It's a good question. Now, in Sankhya system, Mahattatvam is there. The first evolute from Prakriti. Mahattatvam is cosmic mind. Okay, that cosmic mind expresses or manifests itself in individual persons, and that mind is one of the evolutes of Sattvika Ahankara. So, if you can think of the structure of evolution according to Sankhya system, Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti has got another name, Pradhana. From this Prakriti, first evolute is Mahattattvam, which is cosmic intelligence, cosmic mind. From that cosmic mind, Ahankara, ego system. From that Ahankara, it has got 3 dimensions, Sattvika, Rajasika and Tamasika. From Sattvika Ahankara, mind emerges. So that mind is separate. Every person has his own mind. That mind is, it is not one. Every person has his own mind. It is plurality. So that mind is nothing but an expression of the Mahattattvam, the cosmic mind, through the samskaras, individual samskara structure of individual persons. In other words, if a person is a good person, he has good samskaras, the Mahattattvam expresses itself as good samskaras, good mind in the good person. Another person's mind is different.
Maharaj, you mentioned in today's commentary that Sattva and Tamas are the two parts of the mind that cause the evolution of the elements and the perception organs and action organs. What is the role of Rajas in this evolution?
Yeah, there are some schools of Sankhya philosophers who tell you that the indriyas, the karmendriyas and jnanendriyas are the evolutes of Rajasika. But according to Ishvara Krishna, the karmendriyas and jnanendriyas, the mean senses of perception, senses of action and mind, they're all evolutes of Sattvika Ahankara. And Tanmatras are the evolutes of Tamasya Ahankara. Rajasya Ahankara is not involved in evolution according to Ishvara Krishna Sankhyakarya, which is the most authentic available original Sanskrit text that we read today.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, there is a question from YouTube.
Yeah.
Are we only required to meditate on our chosen deities, or can we also meditate on the image of our parents, children, or loved ones?
Yeah, that's true. This is not a subject related to this, but it's related to Bhakti school of philosophy. But anyway, and the only answer is, if you meditate on your parents or grandparents or children, you are likely to meditate not only on their good, desirable characteristics, but you may also meditate upon the undesirable characteristics, because no human being as such can be perfect. Even our nearest and dearest person, we may not, as human beings, we may not take them as absolutely, completely perfect. So it's always better to have a higher ideal or higher idealistic person as an object of meditation. Meditating on the ancestors was practiced among some of the earlier civilizations, like in China, for example. In China, and maybe from China it came to Japan also, meditation or worship or extreme reverence or worshipful attitude towards ancestors. It is practiced, no doubt, but that's not part of mainstream devotional philosophy in any of the established religious traditions. So,
Thank you, Maharaj. I want to ask you a question about George Berkeley.
Yeah.
He didn't seem to have much taste for metaphysics, and when we're comparing Eastern and Western philosophers, it's tricky. I'm aware
I know.
of that.
Yeah.
But still, it seems as though the subjective idealism school just seems to miss that quality of transcendence. They seem somewhat stuck in materialistic thought.
Yeah, true. That's true. Well, Yogacara system is sometimes called subjective idealism by thinkers. Swamiji, I don't think Swamiji refers to that, but Dr. Radhakrishnan and they were all, among the pioneers in popularizing comparative philosophy. So they use those terms, and also many Western thinkers interpreting Yogacara system use the word subjective idealism. But I think it's certainly different from Berkeley, because Berkeley did not have anything, as you mentioned, something related to Naumann, something transcendental. It was more or less, it was some kind of empiricism. Yeah, phenomenalism, nothing more than that. Yeah.
And yet very influential in the West.
Yeah, of course.
Seems to have had influence on David Hume and many other philosophers. So it's still something of a dialectic here in the West. But I guess that's why Thomas. That's that's probably why T.S. Eliot said that they were like schoolboys compared to Indian philosophers.
Really, yeah. As it comes from you, it's okay, but it may not be proper for me to put it that language, That is true. In the Yogacara system, there is so much so profound metaphysics there. The number of books that emerged in the Yogacara system is so huge works. See, the earliest book goes back to maybe 2nd century, 1st century AD. It's called Lankavatara, some kind of hypothetical dialogue between a king who lived in Lanka. His also name is Ravana, not Ravana of Ramayana fame, and Buddha. It's hypothetical discussion you find. And many Asanga, Vasubandhu, Dignaga. Dignaga is the exponent of the first exponent of the modern Nayaya philosophy, Nabya Nyaya. I mean, it's called Madhyama Nyaya. He was a great logician and dialectician. So, yeah. I think Berkeley is part of that trend that emerged as a backlash against the stranglehold of theology over philosophy. That in the church exercised so much of influence on thought, human thought and speculation. So there was this sudden backlash from the phenomenalist empiricists against against anything that is transcendental, anything that is something to religion or transcendental or nominal philosophy. Berkeley belongs to that trend, I think. It's part of that trend. Yeah.
So in that context, then, he can be seen as
Yeah.
pushing the envelope within the system
That's true. That is true. Surprisingly, the Yogacara philosophers were great meditators. So if you go to Ajanta and Ellora, if you go to Bihar, if you go to even the previous Afghanistan, it's an important area of Buddhist philosophers. Afghanistan, Gandhara school of architecture, Gandhara school of art is well known, all influenced by Buddhists, many of these Buddhist monks lived in Afghanistan. It's called Gandhara. So they were great thinkers, great meditators, men who practice yamas and niyamas. So there was something so glorious about the heritage. Okay, thank you.
Swami, I have another question.
Yeah, please, David, please continue.
You had mentioned in the lecture that I think you said when the person dies, when the body dies, the Atman leaves the body, but I thought Atman was all pervasive. So how can it leave the body?
Yeah. No, Atman withdraws itself. Atman, that particular body-mind complex, ceases to be an instrument through which Atman manifests. That's what is called death. So death is not destruction of Atman. Death is only withdrawal of Atman from that particular body-mind complex. It ceases to be a vehicle for the manifestation, an instrument for the manifestation of the presence of Atman. In one of the Upanishads, Chandogya Upanishad, the Tattwamasi discussion, you read 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad, which has got 16 sections, from 9th section to 16th section. Continuous discussion of Tattwamasi there. So Uddalaka gives an example. Suppose there's a tree, and if all the sap withdraws from the tree is no more alive. The tree is no more alive. It just dies away. So that's one example given. So Atman is nothing, death is nothing but the withdrawal of Atman from that body-mind complex. In the same Upanishad, there is an interesting scene when a man is dying, all his relatives gathered around him, and first he looks at them and he talks. Then he stops talking, he looks at them because he recognizes them. And then slowly his ability to recognize those persons standing around him, that also slowly decreases. And eventually that also leaves, and so the body ceases to be an instrument for the manifestation of Atman. That's the idea behind it.
So it's still, the Atman is still there. because
Atman
it's
is
all
everywhere.
pervasive.
It is everywhere. It's everywhere. So that again can be explained like this. What's the difference between a living human being and a wall? Now, if you say Atman is everywhere, Atman is in all of us. It is also on the wall. Now, what's the difference? The difference is, in Vidyaranya's Panchadashi, he gives an example, a very vivid example. He says, suppose you take a mirror and you throw a reflection of the mirror on the wall. It creates a patch of light. But that patch of light can be seen more brilliant, distinct from the rest of the wall. In all of us, there is this mind or buddhi. Mind and buddhi can be understood to be identical in this context. And on this mind, buddhi, Atman reflects. So when people die, that reflecting medium goes away. It merges with Atman as it's. Or like a pot, to secure pot, the space within the pot and the space outside the pot, there is no real difference. But it is called the space limited by the shape and size of the pot, and the space unlimited outside. Suppose that pot breaks, the space within the pot merges with the vast space outside. So this body-mind complex is only an instrument. Another example is, suppose you have suppose you have, let's say, 1,000 vessels filled with pure water, and burning sun overhead. The sunlight is reflected. The sun is reflected on the water. You break all these pots of, or these vessels. There's no more water, no more pots. So what happened to the reflections of the sun? Those reflections emerge with the real sun. These are some of the examples by which this question is answered in the scriptures. So then what corresponds to this vessel filled with water? Our mind. When our mind is pure, the reflection is pure. When our mind is not pure, the reflection is not so pure. That's why Swami Vivekananda said the difference between an amoeba and a Buddha. Buddha here means the enlightened one. That's the real meaning of the Sanskrit word Buddha. The Buddha, The Buddha means the enlightened one. The difference between an amoeba and a Buddha is one of degrees and not of kind. It's not difference of kind, but difference of degrees. In an amoeba is a very insignificant creature. In amoeba, the Atman reflects in a very primitive manner. But in a Buddha, the enlightened one, Atman reflects in his full effulgence. So when we practice meditation, when we do spiritual discipline, spiritual practices, what happens? We are making our reflection, making our mind more and more pure, so that reflection becomes more and more pure. That's the idea behind. Yeah.
Maharaj, I see Mark has had his hand up, and I think he might be ready to ask a question.
Yeah, please, most welcome.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
you spoke a little bit earlier when you were talking about pranayams,
Yeah.
excessive pranayams, about the
Yeah.
yamas and the niyamas.
Yeah.
And the last of the yamas has to do with non-covetedness, non-hoarding. I can't really pronounce the Sanskrit word. It's apara.
Aparigraha.
Vigraha. Yeah. So, verse 30 in the second chapter, in Swami Vivekananda's commentary,
Yeah.
he talks about receiving gifts.
Yeah.
And he says the mind of the man who receives gifts is
Yeah.
acted on by the mind of the giver.
Yeah.
So the receiver is likely to become blah, 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 blah. And at the end, he just says, therefore, receive no gifts.
Yeah.
So when I first read that, I had a hard time reconciling that with some of the habits, not habits, but the customs in our culture, like your birthday,
Yeah.
Christmas, even at times when there's not like a celebration, people giving you gifts.
Yeah.
Could you please comment on, how someone here in America could reconcile if someone wants to give you a gift, should you not receive any gifts at all? Or there certain gifts that are okay to receive? Or how should we deal with that?
Yeah. What Swami, first of all, you should remember, this, it is part of the Ashtanga Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 disciplines, this Yama, Yamasana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, 8 disciplines. So these 8 disciplines are basically, traditionally, they are meant for individual spiritual seekers who are living contemplative lives. So a little bit of the historical background of yoga system should be understood. Yoga system, especially the Ashtanga Yoga, was essentially meant to be an individual spiritual discipline, not to be done in a social context. And in that context, and many of these practitioners were living alone in forest hermitages, or either they were monks or they were retired householders. That's how the tradition is. So the point is, when you live a contemplative life, when you live a contemplative life, a recluse, then if you have a tendency to accept gifts from others all the time, it shows a desire. You have to think of the historical context of the early phase of yoga philosophers, So they had to practice some kind of self-enforced restrictions about accepting things from others, because if you don't restrain yourself, your desire for things cannot be controlled as an individual spiritual discipline. But in modern times, in the social context, it doesn't mean that. So you have to remember, it doesn't mean that you should not accept any Christmas gifts or you should not accept anybody who. It doesn't mean that. So all these spiritual ideas should be taken in the proper context. When you accept Christmas gift from your close friends or your well-wishers or your relations, your relatives or children and others, actually you are not accepting with great ambition and greed, grabbing, nothing of the kind. It is just a courtesy. It doesn't mean, it's a courtesy. It doesn't mean that you are violating the principles of yamas, not at all. On the other hand, if you are always ambitious, always looking for things, somehow to get people from get things from other people, then that desire, that ambition can be a problem. But practice. Gifts are when children visit you once a year or a few times a year and give you something and you accepting or the terrible violation of yama. Not at all. It should not be taken in that context. So they should be understood. So this is important.
What about the verse 39, which says, when he is fixed and on receiving, he gets memories of past life?
Oh yeah, that's true. And again, that's again as a result of practicing yamas and niyamas to a higher level of perfection. When your mind is totally free from all desires, mind becomes like a pure water in a reservoir or maybe in a lake. Water is pure. You can see the rock bottom. You can see what lies at the bottom of the lake. When the lake is full of dust and filth, which in the context of mind correspond to desires, agitations, feelings, ambitions, greed, and so on, then we won't be able to see and look into our own mind. So when we can free our mind from all desires and ambitions and all the agitations, then our mind will be able to connect with something that belongs to some distant past. We'll be able to, this is what you don't talk about it, but you understand it. It's an important thing. If one can practice total freedom from desire, greed, selfishness, then your mind develops a skill, a faculty, which cannot be scientifically proved, but can be very intensely felt. So many of our real experiences are only felt and not talked about. Many of the more important and real experiences are only experienced and not always explained. So at that stage, one will be able to, a practitioner of yamas and niyamas will be able to remember his past or her past. That's the idea behind.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. So thank you for all those questions and health and very lively discussion. Thank you. Namaskar. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.